Picking a national language sounds simple, right? Just one of those things you check off the list when you're building a new country. But what if that one choice could make or break everything? What if it could spark incredible unity or decades of conflict? Well, today we're going to dig into how language becomes the actual blueprint for a nation's identity.
Yeah, really think about it for a sec. A new country is born. What language do you put on the street signs? What do they teach in the schools? What language is spoken in the halls of government? This isn't just, some minor administrative detail. This is a huge decision that can define who belongs and who gets left on the outside looking in.
Just try to imagine the sheer scale of the challenge. Okay, you've just won your independence, fantastic, but your citizens are speaking dozens, maybe even hundreds of totally different languages. So how on earth do you build a single unified nation out of that? You need a common tongue, right? A shared voice. But wow, getting there is just incredibly tricky.
And right away, you hit your first massive hurdle. See, if you just pick the language of the biggest or most powerful group, you're pretty much guaranteed to alienate everyone else. In the Philippines, for example, the choice of Tagalog, well, it created this resentment that you can still feel today because it really felt like it was playing favorites. The stakes here are they're incredibly high.
Okay, so how does a new nation even begin to navigate this kind of linguistic minefield? Well, it turns out linguists have actually mapped out a process for this exact problem. It's almost like a form of, linguistic engineering, and it follows a pretty clear four-step blueprint.
When you really boil it down, language planning has two main jobs. The first part is all about shaping the form of the language itself. Its grammar, its vocabulary, the nuts and bolts. The second job, and this is often the much harder part, is managing its functions and attitudes. That's all about how it's used in society and, critically, how people feel about it. So one side's technical, but the other, that's all about winning hearts and minds.
And this whole process, it breaks down into four pretty clear steps. First up, selection. You got to pick the language or dialect. Step 2 is codification. This is where you standardize it, creating the official dictionaries and grammar rulebooks. Then, step 3, elaboration. You've got to grow the language so it can handle all the complex modern stuff like science, technology, and law. And finally, the last and maybe the toughest step of all, acceptance. You actually have to convince people to get on board and use this new standard language.
All right, so to see how this all plays out in the real world, let's dive into a massive success story, Tanzania.
So when Tanzania became independent, it was facing the exact problem we were just talking about. Look at this map. The new nation was this incredible mosaic of over 100 different languages. If they had just picked one tribe's language, it could have easily sparked resentment, maybe even civil war. So they had to be really careful with this choice.
So, why Swahili? Well, it turned out to be an absolutely brilliant move, and here's why. For one, it was already being used as a common trade language across the region, a lingua franca. 2, it wasn't the native tongue of any single dominant tribe, which made it feel totally neutral. 3, it was an African language, not a colonial one, like English, so it became this powerful symbol of anti-colonial pride. And finally, it had the full, passionate backing of the country's first president, Julius Nyerere.
And the result of all this? Swahili was totally embraced. It became this incredible force for unity, bringing together a hugely diverse population. And it wasn't just a language, it became a proud symbol of Tanzanian identity and freedom, what they call uhuru. It's pretty much a textbook case of language planning done right. But, not every country has such a smooth ride. For a story that's, a lot more complicated, let's head over to Norway. It's a real tale of two competing tongues. So after Norway broke away from 400 years of Danish rule, it found itself in the middle of a massive identity crisis, linguistically speaking. You had the ruling class, the city elites who all spoke Danish. But pretty much everyone else in the country spoke all these different local Norwegian dialects. So the big question was, what is the real language of Norway?
And two competing answers basically went head-to-head. On one side, you had Bokmål, which literally means book language. It was essentially a Norwegianized version of Danish and was seen as sophisticated, established. But on the other side, a linguist actually created a whole new language called Nynorsk, or New Norwegian. He did this by combining rural dialects to forge a language that felt more authentic, more democratic, more Norwegian. And this quote, it just perfectly captures the whole philosophy behind Nynorsk. The idea that a country's right native tongue is what its people have inherited from ancestors, that was a direct shot at the Danish-influenced language of the elites. So you see, this wasn't just about grammar or spelling. This was a battle for the very soul of the nation's voice.
So which side won? Well, officially, neither of them. Both languages are still recognized today. But in the real world, one has definitely become way more dominant. Just look at this chart. Nynorsk usage in schools hit its peak back in 1944, at over a third. But as cities grew and the media mostly used bokmål, its usage has just steadily dropped. So, unlike Tanzania's clear-cut success, Norway's story is really one of a compromise that never quite settled the debate. The country officially has 2 written languages, and the argument over which one is the true Norwegian, well, it's still going on today.
Okay, so we've looked at 2 very different stories here, Tanzania and Norway. What are the big lessons? What does all of this really mean when we think about language and identity?
So, a few things really stand out, right? First, language planning isn't just an academic exercise. It's a super powerful tool for actually building a nation. Second, neutrality seems to be a huge factor. Success stories like Tanzania's often come from picking a language that doesn't just favor one big, powerful group. And probably most important of all, none of this planning works if you can't get the people to accept it. These choices don't just reflect who a nation is, they also create social hierarchies and shape who that nation will become.
When it all comes down to it, it's this simple. The language you speak, the one your government puts on the official documents, it's so much more than just a way to communicate. It literally defines who's an insider and who's an outsider. It's personal, yes, but it is also deeply, fundamentally political.
And all of this leaves us with one last big question to chew on. In today's world, with global languages and digital communication connecting all of us, what does a national language even mean anymore? What's the future for having a distinct national voice in a world that feels like it's getting smaller every day? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.